Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the December 15th Nonprofit Leadership Development Webinar Series. Excited to have you with us. What is here in Wisconsin a very, very cold and inspiring day, but at least the sun is shining and all things are good. So welcome to Look Back, Look Ahead. We are going to take some time today for this to be a bit of a working webinar. So I hope you have an opportunity to grab some paper and a writing utensil. Crayons might be best if you have them at your disposal. And what we're going to have an opportunity to do is to really reflect on the year that has passed and also think ahead and to look ahead for what you want to accomplish as an individual or as an organization in 2017. As we prepare for our time together today, a few webinar logistics. Please turn off other applications on your computer to minimize the distractions so that you can focus on your personal reflection or your group reflection if you're joining with a team. And as part of that reflection, think about why you invested this time today. What do you want to get out of your time this afternoon as we think about opportunities for quality improvement and enhanced performance? And always send me your questions. Use that chat function so we can ensure that you're getting necessary clarity as we go through or answers to questions that arise as we cover the material. Also, attendees will be muted during the call here today. If you're getting an echo, you might need to switch to a headset or to a telephone call-in to try and minimize those disruptions. And again, chat me your questions. We want to make sure you're getting what you need. So with that, let us kick off, look back, look ahead for nonprofit leadership development. A little bit about me. I had the opportunity to work for 25 years helping leaders become more effective, and that experience has crossed sectors, public, private, nonprofit, and the hybrids that have been forming in more recent years, and serve as an executive advisor, strategy consultant, and change manager to help people figure out where they want to go, how they're going to get there, and how they're going to talk about it. And our topic is so applicable to a lot of the work that I do with our clients. And again, experience in all sectors and enjoy the opportunity to hopefully spark some ideas for you here today and encourage you to take some time after today and share this information with others in your organization or others in your network to continue your learning conversation. So if we think about looking back, well, looking back, I'm going to ask you to take a moment and think about what were your dreams when you, about this time in 2015, 1 year ago, and you were thinking ahead to 2016 and what you might want to accomplish. What were those dreams that you had? What were the ideals that you wanted to move forward within your organization? And it's really important to take the time to really stop. Think back to that moment. What was happening in your life or in the organization at that time? What were the challenges that you were facing? What were the goals that were being set for you, for your team, for your organization and your stakeholders? And then what path did you put in place so that you could accomplish them? And what were you dreaming as an individual leader within your organization, whether you're leading from in front, behind, or side by side? Because being able to go back in time and find that moment, focus on what the situation was at that time, allows you to really think about how far you have come, or perhaps to focus on some of the challenges or the hurdles that have presented themselves since that time a year ago. And it's important to take out those documents. If you did have that strategic framework, which I hope you did, guiding you through the year, or that personal professional development plan, go find that document and reread it. And think again about what were the context within which you were working, because so much changes so quickly that it's important to stay grounded. And then when you have your feet firmly planted on the ground, that's when you really can reach for the stars. And so important to take some time, remember what your dreams were and why they were so important to you in that moment. And that's a big part of looking back, so that as you think ahead to the next year, perhaps you're taking the next step with that dream. Perhaps you're refocusing that dream to be something that's slightly more achievable or attainable, because sometimes dreams are just that. They are the ideal, the opportune, and not exactly the thing that you're going to do. So important to take that moment and think about, what were your dreams? And then as you think about having been grounded in your aspirations from a year ago or leading into 2016, then think about, what is your data? It's one thing to assess your progress based upon recollection, and it's another to do it based upon evidence. And so it's important to go back, think about what data is available to you. This is an opportunity to bring forward the dashboards that you've hopefully created for your organization, those visual indicators of progress against the organizational milestone. Similar to the dashboard on your vehicle, it's the indicator that tells you how much fuel you have left in the tank to get you where you're going. That indicator might have to do with employee retention or fulfillment of hiring aspirations that you had. You have that speedometer that's telling you how fast or slow you're going at any period of time. And that might be your revenue expense charts. And to look at that data again on a trend basis. So we have that opportunity to go in and see, how did we do month by month, quarter by quarter, over the span of the year in meeting our financial targets, in satisfying our human relations targets. Also looking at program indicators. What are the outcomes that you've been measuring as an organization, whether that be clients served or measures that you've accomplished. For instance, in a crisis-based organization, perhaps you're looking at the positive outcome achievement of your clients or those that you've been serving to achieve their personal goals. And so what sort of statistics and what data can you be pulling out? And again, really important, if you don't have that dashboard, again, think about what would have been useful data if I were thinking on December 15th of 2016, how much progress have I made and in what manner over the course of the year? What data would have helped me mark that progress, or what data might have helped me course correct as the year went along? That is another opportunity that we have when we think back, is how useful were the goals, were the objectives, were the strategies that we set forth at the beginning of the year? How useful were they in guiding our allocation of resources, our financial resources, our human resources, our social resources, and our intellectual resources? And then again, what is the data that we're using to be able to move those things forward? And so if you know your dreams, and then you have that opportunity to reflect on your data, then ask you to, this is where you'll need your pen and paper. Would encourage you, if you're able, feel free to chat me the words that will come to mind next. I want you to spend a moment in reflection on just 3 words. If you had to think back on 2016, what are the 3 words that come to mind for you, whether that's for you as your organization, if you're an organizational leader, for your team, if you happen to be in a management or supervisory role, or even just for you personally as a professional and as a leader yourself? What were the 3 words that you would use to categorize 2016? And the first 3 words that should come to mind is, just if you think back over the last month, what would be those 3 words for you? So from, say, the 1st of November until today, what are the 3 words that would exemplify the month of November into December for you as a leader and as someone within an organization? We're give you a moment to ensure that you're writing that information down. This will be a bit of a cumulative process that we're going to take you through. And this is also something that you can certainly do with others in your organization. It can be a valuable exercise to do with team members or with boards of directors or with those in a shared leadership roles because you have an opportunity to unearth the connections that people have to the work just passed. So hopefully you have those 3 words written down for the month of November into December. Again, if you want to chat those into me, feel free to let me to do that now. And with that, we know that some of the words that would describe the November into December period, for some it would appear that hectic comes to mind. Looks like we're seeing successful coming to mind as well. Seeing also there's for some folks change, which is not an unusual component that's coming in, particularly toward the end of the year. Harried being another word that can be used for the month of November into December, and that we often see for folks who have lost sight of the goals or the dreams that they had at the beginning of the year, but know that they're being held accountable for them at the end of the year. And so there's that harried push to move forward and get things done. And so thank you to those who are sharing your information. Also see some things come through for the last month of being transitional and seeing underachieved in goals. And that is the time now to have that opportunity, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, to look ahead and what might still be possible to accomplish in the next couple of weeks. So we'll move on from the month. As you may recall, I mentioned this was a cumulative process. So now think about 3 words for the quarter. So if you were going to think about the 3rd or the 4th quarter, October and November into December, what 3 words would you use to describe that quarter? They may very well be the same. They could be different because what we're doing is expanding our view. And the value of expanding your view, of starting within the past month, is that we often have that ability for recall for things that are more close to us in time. Easier to remember something of yesterday than something a week ago versus a month ago versus a year ago. And so by building this spectrum or this time span, you're able to see the continuum of progress made, goals achieved or not achieved, and again, what sort of information might be useful to you to course correct moving forward. So if we think about 3 words that might cover the 4th quarter, what we see for some are conclusions. So we can hope that when we think about those conclusions, that they were positive conclusions and things that helped move the organization forward. And important to recognize that in some cases, those conclusions are merely that. We have closed the door on that and we're moving forward. When we think about change management practices, which is very useful in times of transition, is that that conclusion can be letting go of what was, concluding that end so that you're open to the new beginning. For others, it would look to be, we may have had a 4th quarter of anticipation. So be curious to hear more behind that anticipation. But again, often thinking toward the end of the year and seeing that within the nonprofit community, often you'll hear that anticipation associated with year-end appeals and development goals, because so much of the financial contributions for many grassroots particular organizations are coming in that 4th quarter. So then if we think a bit longer in time span, now I would encourage you to think back over the course of 2016. What 3 words would you use to describe your year to date? And again, that's taking that lens, moving it back, stepping away from the immediate, and requires you to really think about the trajectory that you've been on or that your organization has been on so that you can move things forward. And again, here seeing for some individuals that the just 3 words for the year We see again transformative coming to mind for those three words. So that will be hopefully anticipatory and transformative for that individual or organization going forward. Disappointing is another word that has come up with someone for the year. Often what you can see in that is the opportunity to unpack what may have been disappointing about the year so that you can again address those barriers that you may have experienced early on and have a more successful or more fulfilling year in 2017. So again, this just three words exercise can be a really enlightening thing to do with your group. You can have people complete these three words, have them put them on index cards ahead of the meeting or ahead of the opportunity, because unlike here today where I've just introduced you to this notion without time to think about it, people will often find value, particularly in thinking about the year that's gone by, of having that extra time to find their three words. And then it can be a great exercise to have people come in and then they share their words or just post them and start to look at those opportunities for clustering those three words. And then what you can see is the spirit within your community over the past year, and it can point out opportunities for moving forward as you look ahead to the year coming up. So another opportunity that we have when we think about looking back and looking back in a very constructive manner is to think back over 2016 and ponder, what are you really proud of? What is something as big or as medium or as little as it might seem that you would say, I am really, really proud to have accomplished this or to have done that or to have contributed to the organization in this particular way. And again, thinking about this, there is something over the course of the year that should engender pride. No matter how challenging the year might have been, no matter how disappointing that year may be, there is something that you can be really, really proud of. And for some, that being really, really proud might be acknowledging that things weren't going according to plan. That can be particularly valuable for leaders who often have more of that achiever mentality or that results-driven orientation, to be able to acknowledge that something has gone off track and we're going to move it back on the rails can be something of which to be very proud. Another thing of which to be very proud for some individuals is having said no or having discontinued a program. Again, we think about these things as endings that might bring sadness or concern, but in fact, when you're making those decisions in the best interest of the organization, those are moments that should shine and should be held up and lifted up. And so if you think about what's you can be really proud of, we have some folks on the webinar today who are really proud of having achieved success with the team and with their finances. And congratulations. Wonderful to see that that moment of pride is balancing the human and the financial resources for the organization. So often we will move ahead thinking about the financial goals that we've accomplished without considering the opportunity or the impact that that's had on our human capital. And what we know, particularly in the nonprofit sector, is when we're caring for our stakeholders, cultivating our employees, our volunteers, our donors, our partners, that cultivation, that relationship building is really what will fuel the financial resources to move the mission forward. So congratulations to everyone on those moments of which you're really proud. And so when you have that catalog of things that you've gathered from yourself, from your teammates, again, from board members or others, that's your opportunity to then share that information back to everyone. So we all may have this sense individually of what makes us really proud, but when we can share that and when we can hear and from others what made them proud for the year, in times it affirms our own feelings, and in other times it enlightens us to something we didn't even know happened for the organization. And so that sharing and that exchange of this information is just phenomenal. And it can also provide a strong foundation for you when you're looking ahead and thinking about on what are we going to build for 2017. Build on those accomplishments, on those things that make you proud. And in those moments in 2017 when perhaps your spirits might be a little low or things might seem a bit overwhelming or daunting, pull out that list of accomplishments or pride moments, and you can use that to re-energize yourself and remember about all the things that went back. And then also remembering that it's really important when you think about those moments of pride that perhaps your actions are delivering them to someone else. In the fact, we had an individual share that they were proud when multiple board members thanked them for making it a good year and being such a good leader. Those moments are priceless. And so then you can recognize and realize that the changes you've been trying to make within your organization are truly getting traction. So when you have those moments of pride, there is that opportunity to then think about what did you learn over the course of the year? And when you think about those things that made you proud, those financial targets that may have been achieved, or the team dynamics that really gelled, that appreciation for the transition that you're moving through your organization, what did you learn going through that? Or if you think about why those make you so proud, what are those lessons to be learned or lessons to be shared so that you can emulate that success into the new year? And you can then also take those moments to really reflect on what perhaps didn't go so well. Was there an initiative that was put forward in your organization that just didn't materialize in the way in which you anticipated? And the end of year is a great time, if you haven't taken the time to do it over the course of the year in real time, to just step back and say, what do we need to debrief? What's something that occurred within the organization, good, bad, or indifferent, where there's value in doing lessons learned? Because when we think about learning lessons, our mind often goes to things that went wrong. But there are so many lessons to be learned in the things that went right, or the things that just didn't go anywhere, where they got stuck in neutral and you just couldn't move them forward. And this is an important reflection to be able to look back on this, because you don't want to have that same experience in 2017 or in the time ahead. And so it also allows you to inform your implementation planning or your operational planning for the year. And this is also something that's very important when we think about our own professional development. What did we learn over the course of 2016? And that might be something about how we're using our time. I've been working with a number of clients lately in doing some time tracking, where they are tracking their time for 2 to 3 weeks to really better understand how they're spending their days. And this can be a really fun exercise. It can feel overwhelming, but remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's only indicative. And when you know how you're spending your time, you know what capacity you have to do new initiatives or to foster greater success in the time ahead. So think about, what can we learn about personally and professionally, how we spend our time, when we are the most productive. So I've also been encouraging people to continue to explore their mindfulness and being present in the moment, and in that presence, better understanding, do they benefit from blocking time on their calendar from 8:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. twice a week to do office work? Or perhaps they need to do that starting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because they tend to be a late bloomer in the day. And that's when they're really focused and looking forward to moving projects ahead. So learning more about ourselves and our own routines, our own strengths, our own competencies is really important. And so if we think about then those lessons learned, it gives us an opportunity and a platform to really start looking ahead. And when we think about moving ahead, we're going to start with an exercise, and a lot of what we'll do here again are some more exercises that you can do with your team, with yourself, with your organization to enhance your effectiveness in the new year. And so the first exercise is something that's called the Stop, Start, Continue. And this is an opportunity for you to really think about as a leader, as an individual, as a team, and as an organization, what do you need to start doing? What are some of those projects that perhaps the organization needs to start doing? What might be some of those cultural dynamics that your organization needs to start doing differently? And so these are the new things that you'd like to put on the consideration list for the new year. And so you'll have those things you want to start doing. And then there's also the things that you know you would like to stop doing. That might be stop doing a program. It might be stop doing meetings without agendas or meeting summaries. It might be we want to stop having people interrupt each other during team conversations. Whatever those things are that are getting in the way of your productivity and your satisfaction in your work, create the list of them and be prepared to then think about them in a very meaningful way. And so you'll have your start doing, you'll have your stop doing, and you'll have your continue doing, because there are things that you are doing individually as a team or within your organization that are core to your success and core to your future effectiveness. And it's important to really stop and spend some time to reflect on what do you need to continue doing. What is at the heart of your success and your effectiveness? What is helping to fuel that financial success? What is helping to allow for that planful transition that you're going through? And so to create these lists of start, stop, and continue. And then again, as an individual, what you can look at is ranking things that you believe in terms of how hard they might be to stop, start, or continue doing, and the impact that they're going to have. And in a moment, we'll show you a prioritization exercise that might be useful, again, in this analyzing this data. One thing I do also want to go back to call out is I had mentioned the opportunity that you would have to use this start, stop, and continue exercise. And to do it at multiple levels. This can be particularly effective even as a performance management technique. So if you're supervising others or having a group discussion with your board, what you can do is, again, have them think about as an individual, so either as an individual board member, as an individual contributor to the organization, what do I personally need to start doing? What do I personally need to stop doing? And what do I personally need to continue doing? And have them think about that at an individual level. And then have them think about it from a group level. And so what does the team or what does the board of directors as a collective entity need to start doing? What does it need to stop doing? And what does it need to continue doing? And again, have everyone on the team do this as an individual. And then what you have as a group conversation are, all right, folks, what did you have on the start doing list? And then people have that opportunity to share their ideas within a framework or a construct that allows for them to have more constructive conversation. Another opportunity you have with that group conversation is asking everyone to pick the one thing from each of their start, stop, and continue lists that they want the group to consider. And so that allows for them to also prioritize their own ideas, bring something forward to the group Also in a way that if someone else in the group has said that, it gives them the opportunity to either affirm it and reinforce it or go to their number 2 on the list. And you can, again, start to prioritize and call those ideas in that moment. And so again, having people do that on an individual, what can I start, stop, and continue? What can the group or the board start, stop, and continue? And then what does the organization need to start doing, stop doing, and continue doing? And again, you're gathering a great deal of evidence and data that you can use to then refine your strategic operational plan or your implementation plans for the year ahead. It's also giving you a good set of data and evidence from which individuals can start to see where they might be able to contribute in more meaningful ways, or perhaps where they might need to develop skills so that they're better positioned and better poised to help move the organization and the mission forward in the future. So that start, stop, and continue can be used in a variety of settings, and it's a great tool for being able to look ahead and then to prioritize where you're going to take action. Another opportunity, and this to some degree can connect to the 3 words exercise that we did as we were looking back over the year, is to flip that a bit and think about what's the tone you'd like to prevail in the year ahead for whomever you are leading. And so this is, again, thinking if we were going through a change process in 2016, what's that tone that you would like to prevail in 2017 as the transition starts to take hold? And again, to think of this, you can do it in a number of ways when you think about the tone. If you happen to have a brand framework, you can use that to see, is there an aspect of our messaging, of our brand traits that we really want to lead with in the year ahead? What do we need people to think, feel, understand, and remember about our organization? You can think about it in terms of the tone of the music that you'd like to prevail in the year ahead. If you were going to set the soundtrack for your year, what type of music would be on it? Would you have that theme song that you could point to and say, for 2017, Walking on Sunshine is going to be the tone that we'd like to set forth and see prevail in the year ahead? And it can also be looking at it, is the tone that we need to set for the year ahead, is it a tone of hope? Is it a tone of accomplishment? Is it a tone of results orientation? Is it a tone of everybody lining up with the direction this new organization is going and feeling good about it? It's just very important, particularly from a leader's perspective, to have in your own mind and in your own heart that tone that you want to set over the course of the year, because that gives you your North Star, as some would put it. It's your guide to how you talk, what language you use in your communications, how you are present in your organization or in your situations, what expectations you're going to have of people and how they're representing the organization or carrying that work forward. It's just so important. Research shows us that people perform better and with greater productivity when they're clear on their purpose. And the purpose goes hand in hand, in my opinion, with the tone of the organization, because the tone is what really starts to shape and reflect the culture. We can have 5 organizations, each with the same purpose, but when they have different tones for how they approach their work, it looks very different. And one is not necessarily better than the other, but it allows for different types of people to fit into different organizations and still be able to move forward in ways that are truly meaningful to themselves, to their organizations, to their stakeholders, and to society as a whole. And so I would encourage you to really think about this. And if you're part of a leadership team, again, this is the kind of conversation that you should be facilitating or have facilitated so that all of the leadership is on the same page. about that tone, or if there needs to be a slightly different tone put forward in different departments, that everyone's clear on that. And they are also clear on how those different tones are harmonizing for the greater good of the organization. Because we need to remember that, not all things are equal. We need different notes. It may be that with where your organization is situated, the tone in your development department needs to be different than the tone in your programs and services area, which might need to be different than your operations. And that's appropriate. And what you just need to make sure is that when all of those tones come together, you're making beautiful music. And if there is discord that arises, that you're finding it, seeing it, and discussing it to see what's changed the tone, what's moved things. Is it something within our control? Is it something within our influence? Is it something that we need to course correct for and be able to move that forward? So tone is really crucial when thinking about looking ahead in organizations. Another, I mentioned earlier, we'd have that opportunity to look at a prioritization tool. This is a 2x2 prioritization tool that comes out of Lean Six Sigma, often used in that environment and in that methodology. It is known by a number of different names, and I like PACE because what you're looking at are what are the priorities, what is the action, what are the challenges, and what needs to be eliminated. And so what you can do with all of those ideas that you come up with as an individual or as a team or as an organization at whatever level, it's really your opportunity to look at how are we going to prioritize things. And so what you do is you, on a scale, you can choose your scale, typically 1 to 10, thinking about how easy and hard is this initiative to do. So 1 being very easy, 10 being very hard to do, and then you'll plot that along the horizontal axis. And so essentially, if something is right in the middle, it's going to be right in the middle of that line, right where the axes intersect. And so you look at every initiative and analyze it by how easy it is to do and what the payback is going to be. And so that payback can also, you can think about that as the return. What's our return on investment going to be for this initiative? And again, 1 through 10. So small payback would be a 1 at the bottom of the vertical axis, a 10 being a large payback at the very, very top. And so what will happen is that you will start to see the first time you do this, in fact, you may find that everything's a priority, because we often think that many, many things are easy to do. And of course, there's going to be a large payback because it was my idea. If you see everything cluster in that priority box, go back and do it again. Be a little more discerning in how actual the resources are. And so something may seem like it's very easy to do, but then you have to consider, is it easy to do, and do we have the resources to do it, and how does that fit in with the work we're already doing, and how is that part of our strategic intent for the organization, and do we have the competencies and skills in-house, or are we going to need to do those externally? And so figuring out 1 through 10 on ease, and then 1 through 10 on return or payback. And this exercise can be used in any number of different venues and with different groups. And again, what you're looking to do is particularly find what are those things that are really going to be hard to do, and they're not going to have much of a payback, and that you can just eliminate those items. For the action items, when they're easy to do and a small payback, that's the low-hanging fruit of which we often speak. So that's a great way to demonstrate little wins to people along the way as you're moving things forward. Those easy to do with a large payback, priority, let's make that happen. We can get a large payback for little effort. We make sure that we put those in a priority plan. It does not need to mean that everything happens at once or has to happen within the next month, but you make it a priority to get those on the plan. And when they're hard to do, but there's a large payback, the challenge is really encouraging you to challenge the idea and to challenge your resources and your capabilities to see how might we plan for that. And if you're unable to plan for that, then to be able to make that determination, is this one of those things we just need to put on the shelf? We're not saying that we're not going to do it, that we're not going to pursue it, but maybe that one needs to wait for a while. So that while you may see as a nonprofit organization the need to diversify your donor base, for instance, and have that opportunity to garner more people and to have greater connections, and to do that, you might need to reach out in different ways without those connections. You'll see it's a huge payback. It is challenging to essentially break into new markets. And so the organization needs to figure out what steps could it take along the way to make that happen. And so those are often your dreams. And it's then finding ways in which to make those dreams a reality without overtaxing people. So hopefully that tool is something that you can use and make sense. If you have questions about that, obviously pull into the chat or in how that might be used when you think about looking ahead in your organization. I think it's also important, and I referenced this earlier, when we think ahead, important to remember our mindfulness and the fact that, again, we're seeing continued evidence for the value of mindfulness as a practice for successful and effective individuals and organizations. And so the graphic here reminding us that it's important when we look ahead to live this moment and not the next. And that we need, again, to be present, aware of what's working. What are those things we need to continue? And if we're thinking about making changes moving forward, then important to think about making those changes in ways that are achievable, that are reasonable, that are sustainable, and that are also aligned with our strategic intent. And so I would encourage everyone, when you think about living this moment, go back to the basics. Be present when you're in meetings with individuals. Looking ahead, set the tone for your organization that individuals matter and that voices are respected. Those are two universal truths that work within boardrooms, within meeting rooms, within organizations and team settings. And so living that moment is about turning off your email, not going on to social media when you're particularly in meetings or in conversations. If you're in a meeting with someone and gathering ideas and you're there as an observer or a participant, live that moment by focusing on the people who are in the conversation. Don't bring in paperwork or other things that you can fill out in that moment. Don't multitask. Be there, be ready, and also live your moments to celebrate them. So many good things happen in a moment that we just pass us by, or that we acknowledge fleetingly and then forget. And living that moment, celebrating the moment, instead of waiting for the next big opportunity, can position you, can create community, and can really poise the organization for greater success moving forward. So while we may be looking ahead for our organizations and thinking ahead for greater success, ensuring that we're finding time in that present moment to ensure we're acknowledging progress, that we're identifying the responses that people are having to that moment or to that change, to that transition, to that plan, or to that disappointment, and being able to manage that moving forward. Truly the sign of a great leader and a necessary leader, particularly within the nonprofit community, where what we see so often is such a rapid pace of responsiveness, of change, of moving things forward, and such pressure. So encourage all leaders and all nonprofit leaders to really live this moment and not the next. And when we think about preparing in that moment for the next moment, that's time to plan. And it was great to see that someone had brought up planning and planful in their descriptions for their year gone by. Let's plan for the year ahead. Here we have some questions, 6 questions that can be useful. And this is pulled from some reading that I've done in Thinking Through Time, which is a historical book that talks about, again, thinking in time as a means of preserving and protecting your history as a way to inform your future. So I would encourage you when you step back, and again, this can be on an individual, a team, or an organizational basis, if you think about what you want to accomplish, what is the landscape ahead? What's the data that you can pull together? What are the experiences from which you can learn? Again, the great way to use the data that you collected in your look back section of what's that landscape ahead. Also from a nonprofit perspective, great opportunity to go out and talk with donors, community partners, and other stakeholders and ask them, what do they see on the landscape ahead? What changes are forthcoming for which you need to be prepared as an organization? And when you have that picture of the landscape ahead, then it allows you to go to that next question of where are we located in that landscape? So if this is what the world is going to potentially look like in 2017, where are we in that world? Are we right in the middle? Are we out on the fringe? Are we sort of up on a mountain? Or are we down in a valley? And so again, to think about those strengths, those opportunities that you have, where are you located in that landscape? Because once you know what that landscape looks like, if you can ground yourself in your position in that landscape, then you can think about what your options are. So if we are down in the valley and we want to be up on the top of the mountain, what are the options we have to get us there? Do we need to refocus the projects on which we're working? Do we need to cultivate different volunteer talent or different staff talent so that our intellectual capital has a different feel to it? Are the options to partner with someone? Are the options to dissolve? When you think about going up that mountain, is it just too much? I was involved with an organization that went through a similar set of questions, ultimately to determine that, in fact, when they looked at the landscape ahead, for them looking ahead over the next 5 to 10 years, and where they found themselves located in that moment, their options were really limited, particularly because they set out their plan of options of cultivating greater engagement with volunteers and donor and sponsors to we just need to dissolve. And when they thought about what they really cared about, it came to the realization that they could not mobilize the resources that were necessary to move their mission and to change their position in that landscape, because the players had changed in such a way in their world that they no longer had the support they once did, and that so many other organizations had emerged to do pieces of what they had once done on a holistic scale, that ultimately they chose to dissolve the organization and to take their finances. They were not in a financially poor situation, and they redirected those financial resources to another organization that could continue their spirit in a more meaningful way. And it was a beautiful process through which to go. And it's important when you think about those options that you are looking at a spectrum. And then you can analyze those options based upon the question of what do we really care about? And you'll notice it's what do we really care about? Not just what do we care about, because that's everything. What is real and true and at the core of success for the organization? And what's at the core of the ideology, that mission, that vision, and that values that really move the organization forward or help it to achieve what it wants in the greater good? So that when you can ground your options and what you really care about, it allows you to think about how do we maximize priorities? Because if you know what the landscape looks like, where you're located, what your options are, what you care about, then how do we marshal our resources to move forward in that intentional way so that we're moving from the valley up to the top of the mountain, or from the fringe of that landscape right into the center? or for some organizations from the center, a little bit out to the fringe. So maximizing priorities is really important. And your plan should also look at how do we avoid trivia? And by trivia, think about that in the terms of these are the little things that are just getting in the way. How do we avoid those things, those excuses, those activities, those gnats that fly around and distract us from what we need to be doing to maximize our priorities? And so how do we avoid that trivia can have a lot to do with identifying and unpacking what's the trivia, what gets in the way. And on an individual basis, the trivia might be, that board member who always says no or doesn't participate. And by not participating, they have this power over the conversation. What strategies can you put in place to mitigate that from getting in the way of your progress? Another concept of the trivia that can be avoided is thinking about the interruptions that can happen in a project, or think about stakeholders who can come in and just veer you off because they're so gifted at showing you shiny new objects. So again, being mindful and present in your planning to be very clear about what's ahead and how you're going to get where you need to go. And documenting all of this. So again, you can look back on it as you go through the year so that you're ready to reflect, identify those things from which you can learn, things of which you should be proud, as a means of informing your next step as an organization. Another opportunity, again, born from thinking in time, is a lot of times issues just crop up. And sometimes they can distract, sometimes they can seem insurmountable, and sometimes you just don't know where to start the conversation. And so when we think about the strategic conversations necessary to look ahead and move an organization forward, a leader really has an opportunity to create 3 buckets. And so within those buckets, when you break down barriers and move toward constructive conversation, what you're moving toward is what is known about this issue. What are the facts at hand? What do we actually know about this impending policy change or this impending legal pursuit? And so what you might know, for instance, in a regulatory change, is you might know the process or the approval process, if you will, that moves that forward. You might know what the actual dates are within that approval process. And beyond that, you might know very little. So your first bucket is what is known about the issue, and then what is presumed about the issue. What are those assumptions that people have been making, or that mythology that might go along with an issue? So for instance, what might be presumed about an issue when you're dealing with a merger, for instance, what might be presumed about that issue is the way those 2 organizations feel about each other, or you might be presuming how the community will respond, or you might be presuming the response of the financial donors to each organization and what they'll think about this issue or this merger. But a lot of the time, those are presumptions that we're making. We have not moved them from a presumed to a known category. The third category is what is unclear about the issue. So we have what is known about the issue, what is presumed about the issue, and what is unclear. What is just not known? What's really vague? What do we need to get more clarity on before we can even make a presumption, let alone find the evidence to turn that into a known fact? And so taking a major issue or a major initiative and asking these 3 questions, or categorizing the conversation threads that emerge over the course of that discussion, can just be really powerful for clarifying for people when they're actually making presumptions on things that they don't know. And it can be a constructive tool that you can use in particularly challenging conversations so that people really have to start talking to each other in these terms. So that is some of the opportunity that you have when you look ahead to foster constructive conversations, and again, help people understand what they know and what they don't know. wanted to take a few moments, what would a look back, look ahead conversation be without thinking about trends? So had an opportunity to reflect on this myself and also look to what others out in the world are saying. And the fun thing about looking at trends, particularly those annual predictions, are that they are not typically rocket science. Trends are trends for a reason. There's something that is foretold and something toward which momentum is being built. And there were two sets of trends that I thought particularly useful within the realm of nonprofit leadership and thinking about momentum to continue for organizations. So the list on the left, looking at humanizing your marketing, what we know, what we continue to hear is that storytelling is the future of compelling your audiences and compelling your stakeholders. And so putting that human face, that human element, that human touch on what you're doing and communicating the human aspect will be even more critical as we look into 2017. We're going to continue to see the need, and again, not just to put a human face on it, but to humanize it, to have those human emotions and human actions driving your marketing and really making it mission-driven marketing. Another great trend to consider is, of course, those mobile devices, those things that I constantly are telling people to put down when they're in meetings and in other things, but thinking about how mobile technology can be used to simplify donations. We are starting to see some things emerging in the trade publications and in other fronts where you're going to see more opportunities for people to give directly from their phone in very unique ways. So I think important for all nonprofits, particularly smaller nonprofits, to really think about keeping that at the forefront of what you're monitoring and trends, and then thinking, how can you capitalize on that? Also, seeking fresh perspectives, and again, that human connection coming through again. But with the fresh perspectives, a twist on that being an opportunity in the coming year to get outside of your typical network. And so having that opportunity to reach out to other nonprofits, to reach out to people in different sectors and ask them for opinions about your issues or about your mission specifically. Taking that opportunity to really put yourself into unusual conditions, places you've never been, and then finding the human connection in those moments that you can leverage to advance your nonprofit specifically. So important, that human element balanced with how do humans want things to be easier for them, were some great trend suggestions coming out of Forbes. And then also from a philanthropic perspective, Ali Sterling Philanthropy came up with a list that I think speaks to that continued opportunity with momentum building. So what you're going to see is a continued push on something that I've been advocating for years, which is year-round proactive recruitment of board members. Gone are the days when February 1st comes around and you say, oh, we need to have new board members by May 1st or March 1st or whatever that is. Year-round cultivation for prospective board members will be even more critical going forward. Continued emphasis on the next generation and how can we engage them in nonprofit work, in mission advancement, and really being ambassadors for the missions and the visions we're putting forward. Building that culture of philanthropy, continue to see that heartbeat where philanthropic identification, cultivation, stewardship is part of everyone's duty when they're involved in a nonprofit. We're also going to see case building around program costs. This has been a trend that's been coming, the continued pushback about highlighting administrative costs and figuring out what those allocations are and how critical or non-critical they might be. And overall, just getting back to basics. You'll see that coming more and more throughout 2017 and certainly into 2018, I'm convinced, and beyond. We're already seeing people as they're coming up with their New Year themes. It's been a big thing lately instead of New Year's resolutions, seeing a lot about simplification and simplifying. And so that will also be getting back to basics of what it means to be a nonprofit and what it means to represent community interests in meeting your mission and moving that forward. Ultimately, my encouragement to you when you think about looking back and looking ahead is to prioritize some of those key things that you can start doing, stop doing, and continue doing to move your mission forward, to become more effective, and to advance yourself as a leader. Prioritize them and make them happen. You can do it. I know that you can, and use some of the tools that we went through today. Hopefully some of the other tools you've picked up through the seminar or the webinar through the course of the year, and celebrate it. Make these things happen and then really celebrate completion and move it forward. So welcome a continuation of this conversation or others. Contact me directly through my email, phone. Also follow on Twitter for a stream of interesting range of topics. Also on Facebook, and obviously connect through LinkedIn and let me know that you are connecting as a basis of webinar participation. And happy to answer any questions that you might have. We'll be doing a Leadership by the Book series in 2017, so look for more information on that. If you would like to be notified of that, either contact me through my email, melanie@timpanoconsulting.com, or go to the website and you can sign up online for some notifications. So we'll look forward to that, and also be traveling Wisconsin, presenting at conferences throughout the year. So we'll look forward to seeing you out and about, and encourage you again, find ways you want to be more productive as a leader and as a mission-driven organization, and then make it happen. You can do it. So go forth, have a fabulous rest of the day, rest of the year. Find something you'd like to accomplish between now and December 31st and make that happen. Thank you very much.